Giving thanks, giving thanks, giving thanks. A blessed new rise to everyone. Grand Rising, Hotep, Bayete. What's up, Wagwan? All of those different greetings. We are really honored to be able to have this reasoning opportunity among African Queen Mother Warriors. I am Nasukmut As, Senate Dr. Chen. I will leave that there for now, and I would like to share our next level of opening with our beloved sisters of the African Queen Mother Warriors Rising Movement. Yes, African Queen Mother Warriors is Dr. Sandra.
Peaceful greetings and warm ancestral spiritual salutations. I am African Queen Mother Warrior Sis Doctor, and I am honored to be in the presence of royalty again. I love the warrior aspect of who we are. Peace.
Long term. I also request that grace, that fierce revolutionary peace and voice with artivism out of this world from African Queen Mother Warrior. Basu asked, Isis.
Greetings, greetings, Bora Boye, Uja, and many greetings, Wagwan, as he said, in all our many, many languages and formats. It is an honor to be amongst the great ones, the queens, the empresses, the goddesses. Look at the beauty here today, the intelligence, the fierceness of the warrior spirit. And I'm very, very pleased that there's 4 of us here today. I feel like the puzzle is coming together. The energy is there. Blessings all.
Grateful, grateful. And also with a wordsmith, masterful engagement and exchange, and being able to bring not just jurisprudence and the legal perspective to the forefront, but to bring all levels of air, fire, earth, water, spirit, and water. Notice I said it like out of intentionally, because that ancestral spiritual vibration is always shared and highlighted by our beloved African Queen Mother Warrior, Sister Esther Side.
Giving thanks for being here. I was missing for a session or two, but I'm glad to be back. I was missing in action, doing the work.
Right, right.
But I've been found. I've been found and I'm back.
Beautiful, grateful. And giving thanks. So for the persons that may not be as familiar as to what is African Queen Mother Warriors, there is a orientation that is available if you look on any of our previous podcasts. We've been more formal, I should say, from December of last year, and then we've been making the intentional work move forward to be able to gather, have these reasonings at least once a month. And we usually do them on the Sundays. Usually we do it on the 3rd Sunday. However, this month, because there's so many things happening in the international, global, regional, national as well as homegrown local spaces, it was imperative that we gathered in this forum, in this time, in this compensation, to make sure that we keep things in Ma'at, in truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony. Hence the vibration of love offered through our opening video with the powerful songstress Desiree. And I always encourage persons, and we give thanks. You know, she's one of our homegrown daughters here in St. Croix, and has impacted global communities specifically through her ability to use her voice to tell the narrative, to tell this to the legacy. And part of what we're sharing this morning is also linked to, since everyone's speaking of anniversaries, this is also an anniversary of the formal development, if you will, of not something that just happened 10 years ago, but the legacy of work of each of us that extends beyond scores. And notice I said scores plural, right? Many of us, we just look young and we carry ourselves to the best of our ability to keep that youthfulness. However, many of us have been in the trenches, in this work for decades upon decades. And so what we're sharing is coming from a space of being researchers, of being artists, of being organizers, of being activists, of being midwives. And when I speak of midwifery, midwives of the physical birth piece, but also spiritual midwives, political midwives, economic midwives, I can go on. So I would like for persons to just have that in the forefront as you're listening and hearing some of the reasoning. It was April 11th, 2015. And there were a number of international reparation initiatives happening, not only in the 48 contiguous US, but also in other parts of the globe. And there was a culmination during this global reparation movement that's really 21st century focus to support and highlight the designation that was in place for the United Nations first International Decade for People of African Descent. Again, the themes around recognition, justice, and development. And I'll just highlight the opening statement that came at the conclusion of that April 9th to 11th International Reparations Summit that to this day has still remained unanswered. And it was a simple, what does that translate into for our people in regard to these summit, that particular summit and those that preceded it? And then I quote, respectfully, all the voices and actions with sacred intentions for our liberation, unification, and sovereign social governance are to be included. In simple terms, without equal male and female involvement in the reparations movement, there can be no recognition, justice, and development. I want us to simmer on that for a second because the entire statement, one page, was disseminated widely and with very few commentaries, inclusive of the video that has sat for over 9 years, well, now 10 years, on YouTube for persons to see and hear what was said immediately following that particular gathering, based on how sistren like us were dismissed. Some,
Mhm.
right? I just would like to pause there and leave the floor open for the next layer of our reasoning.
Give thanks. Give thanks. I think that historical piece is really important so that it is to be understood that we didn't just come to this the other day, that we are called to do this work, that we've been doing this work in our various ways, in different continents, under different skies, And so we're very invested in the well-being of the African family. We are concerned when it would appear that a movement that is considerable appears to be hijacked, when attempts to publicly humiliate women and marginalize our voices as if this has nothing to do with us takes place. At this point, I'd invite my beloved sister, African Queen Mother Warrior Basso asked, Sis, to remind me and maybe share with others how some of this happened.
Giving thanks, giving thanks. Well, I think realistically, if I look around this screen at the queens, the goddesses present here, I probably came to a lot of this at a later age in terms of these formal structures. I know, for example, we're going to hear from Sister Esther, who was very young, actually, sitting in these big spaces, raising her voice, as was Senate Doctor. And I think yourself as well, Sister Doctor. I was on the street activist, anti-apartheid, fighting police and carrying on and, you know, all of that stuff. And I think when for me, the first really introduction into this is when I met yourself and Senator Doctor in 2014 at the CARICOM second CARICOM reparations conference. And we all connected on so many levels, I think spiritually, as queens, politically, as activists, because what I saw going on there, I was like, who are these people? What are they on? What are these men? Why are they just so curtailing to the system? You know, I remember speaking with yourselves and others, like, why is there a white lawyer sitting down in here in our African reparations? And then it was like, oh, no, we mustn't talk about that because, you know, there was a whole thing in Barbados. And I know Sister Esther was there for that. So I was really taken aback I thought I was going into a far more revolutionary space. And I came to realize, oh no, it ain't that revolutionary at all. And my connection with the two of you, Senator Dr. Chinzera, African Queen Mother, Sister Dr. Sandra, was very much like, we were all like, what's going on here? Many of the men were coming with their, which I'm going to call, as we go through this same men syndrome, this ideology, the ego, the patriarchy, and actually misogyny, I would say, and the disrespect of our knowledge and our equity and our rights to speak. The one man who I noticed didn't do that, your king, Senator Doctor, stood like a pharaoh protecting his queen. And that's one thing that stood out in my mind, the way he stood there behind you with the power, the energy. And other men, unfortunately, there were some good people there. I'm not saying, of course, we love our men. We're not saying all of them. But what I saw there was very disappointing. And then, of course, roll forward now, 2015 to April, I come to the National African American Reparations launch. And I met yourselves, and we met our other African Queen Mother warriors, Sister Tempu, Sister Aziza, and the five of us were like, what is going on in this space? And I know we're going to talk more about it on every level, spiritually, intellectually. I mean, even the food situation. My uncle had to come and bring me food. Luckily, he lived in Queens and it was down the road. He came with some fresh juice and some that. But I was like, what are they serving us? On so many levels, the thing was just not what should have happened. And that is what triggered us to gather and become the African Queen Mother warriors we are today. I also have a story in a relationship with Sister Esther, but we'll come to that later as we move through, where we've all connected on on an energy that says something needs to change. We have so many issues to deal with, and these people, these same men, are not the solution. So I'll leave it there for now. Sister Esther?
Yes, and I came to connect with you all formally as African Queen Mother Warriors much later. However, I was very aware of your presence and the video and the statement that you put out at that summit that is being commemorated today, that took 10 years ago, that took place 10 years ago. And I was very infused and really, really happy to see that there were women voicing, African Queen Mother Warriors, voicing what I had been thinking and feeling, and also some of the thoughts and sentiments I had been expressing in spaces, and at that time was considered, I don't know, a public enemy to some of um, the people who led that summit in terms of organizing it and putting together the program. Because I am a co-founding member and co-vice chair of PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe. And by this time, we had been one of the few coalitions, organized voices that had a critical perspective on the emergence of what has become the CARICOM 10-point plan, which first began obviously as the CARICOM reparations initiative. And in particular, who had been very concerned and actually up in arms around the calling on Day, the law firm, the white-led law firm here in the UK, to somehow take up a Caribbean reparations case. And we were up in arms because of the role of Day in the what's called popularly the Mau Mau case, but we say the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, some of the survivors
Mm-hmm.
of colonial torture who were trying to sue the British government. And that did result in a settlement that was litigated and negotiated by Day. But we were very concerned about the fact that our people literally got peanuts. A small class of our people, or category, I should say, of our people, just over 2,000 people, did get a settlement, but it was literally, I mean, it was really atrocious. And we felt it was not a good idea for CARICOM to think that that would be the law firm to utilize. And because the terms of that settlement actually, and many people didn't follow up on this, and it's really important, um, that the terms of that settlement prevented future legal action for a more substantial class of survivors. I mean, we're talking about elders, mothers, fathers of the liberation struggle, the anti-colonial liberation struggle in Kenya, who were tortured, women who had things, objects put up their private parts, and men who had been castrated, and all manner of really, really, you know, disgusting atrocities. And the settlement resulted in a compensation payment of just over £2,000 for elders who had survived, over 50. And it was just ludicrous. So anyway, that is how I was, very much part of a small group and vocal group of people that were resisting this and were sort of saying, hang on a minute, this cannot be right. This cannot be reparatory. And I would have to say that it was our actions actually led to, I wouldn't say there being a total rethink, but they certainly had to change strategy and approach because of the resistance that they were meeting here in Europe, and in particular in the UK. So that was the wider context within which I discovered and heard about you as African Queen Mother Warriors. And I was just so proud and happy to know that there were other people actually raising these voices and challenging the process, because we talk a lot about reparations and we think about the end goal of whatever people think or envision reparations to be. But we miss out that the most important part of even achieving whatever end goal you believe reparations to be is the how we get there, the process. And what you all did as African Queen Mother warriors was really, I think, raised to an international stage. Again, not the constructive, criticisms, as it were, constructive on what we should be doing if we were really being centered as African people and we were really honoring our ancestresses and our ancestors, what our processes would look like, what our summits would look like, how we would have to honor our ancestors and ancestresses, which didn't happen, and everything else that you really brought to light. So yes, that is how we connected. And of
Can I
course, I had known some of you before, but we hadn't really formally connected in an organized way. Yeah.
give thanks? Can I offer some further thoughts here? Um, I I am stimulated. Might not appear so, but I am very stimulated by the word sound and the energy that we bring to this important discussion for a number of reasons. One is I love the analogy of birthing and rebirthing on different levels in different ways. I think that's really fundamentally what we're about. Believing that that which has gone before doesn't have to be the way that we continue, especially as we are sitting within the context of a narrative that says we have another decade for African people of African descent. And that announcement coming from a body of people that are not us, like we are being given permission to do this for a longer period of time. And the likelihood therefore that there will be funds attached to this, and there will be visibility attached to this and legitimacy attached to this. I think the reference to the process is really key, because we've been given a reminder of how we came to be together, each one of us having trod as a result of spiritual calling, because really no one would choose this as a career. There is no money in it. What there is an honoring and a continuing based on the legacy we've been left by our ancestors. So we are talking about honor. However, in my observation, and I am very observant in these spaces, I don't necessarily speak every time I'm in these spaces, so people don't necessarily know I'm there, because I don't need to be at the podium or on the stage. But I am an African woman moving among people who are talking about what's going to happen to the African family. And so it's my business. It's my business because it is divinely ordained that it should be my business. It's nothing to do with my qualifications. I didn't have to go to any Eurocentric school or college or university or be in any particular clique to have been given this task. And so I invite those who are watching this to become active themselves, and not just to become viewers or listeners or audience members of the words we are bringing, I would encourage people to look at the same men, these same men who may be rooted in politics or may be rooted in economics or maybe historians or maybe whatever it is they are, but they clearly are not African-centered. Because if they were African-centered, they wouldn't be attempting to hijack a movement that started long before they got involved. They wouldn't be attempting to discredit and target African women who are simply saying, we applaud your work, but there's some things that are missing. Can we enter into some kind of discourse around this? Only to be told that our voices are not welcome. In fact, the public attempt to humiliate us by turning off the microphone in a conference that is about reparations was something of a shock to all of us. I think that was the fire that forged us together, that this could be allowed to happen and nobody object. There were murmurings, but that there is a comfort that these same men enjoy when they're at the top table and they can order someone to turn off the mic, or they can be in another country and sit. They flank white men that they have brought into a space to determine what will happen to the African family. When there are lawyers, very able lawyers within this region, but you bring in white people, and these white people are brought in under the cover of these same men. If you who are watching...
And can I just add one thing? They're not just brought in, they are funded, they are paid, their passage is paid, their accommodation is paid. I'll just throw that in.
Give thanks. If you pay attention to the ones who are bringing them in, you will probably discover the same thing that I have discovered, which are that these men are not honorable men. They are not honorable. Now, one could say, I am casting all kinds of aspersions, but some of these men, now I encourage you who are watching to do your own research. Some of these men are building empires with their names at the top of it. Some of these men have conflicts of interest. They sit within political spaces and they also claim to lead civil society. Some of these men are accused of assaulting women. Some of these men, this is research that can be done. It's not hard. You just have to do you don't even have to do a Google search. You just do a YouTube search. Some of these men are known for harming women. So that which they did to us is nothing new. They are traveling at the expense, not of themselves. They are getting funding. They are championing a cause which is becoming questionable because of who they are and who they are not including. They are orchestrating conferences and seminars. They have established back rooms where decisions are being made. They are facilitating photo opportunities so that the optics look good. And they are threatening those of us who are saying, stop before this gets too far. Let us still speak to each other and honor our ancestors. They are not interested in the slightest. And in fact, word is reaching our ears that we are now being told to be careful. Be careful. Because clearly these men bring forth children. These men are greater than the Most High. These men care not for our ancestors. These men have been overtaken by their own ego. These men think that if they threaten us or send word that we should be careful, that we will stop. And what I would like to say to these men is that the Most High will decide when we take our last breath. That's what will happen. And so at this point, we have data that we are sharing. So even if you take one of us out, it will not stop what you have caused.
I was
Peace.
going to offer that as we reference these same men, that we're also, and I'm sharing this in my eye, including select women who
Mm-hmm.
enable these same men and hold them up, even when there is a need for intervention, reasoning, change of behavior beyond apology, that in word, that there should be a transformative shift in how these men engage with we women who move with the African Queen Mother Warrior vibration shift, etc. Because we're following that ancestral piece. And the reason I desired to bring that in, because the quality is not 100%, I'm going to see if I can get that small clip. And I encourage persons that are listening, that are viewing, to look at the link to what was actually videotaped. I think I just turned around one of my cameras. We sat in a half circle right in the grounds where we were just
Ejected,
that one
unceremoniously ejected.
from being able to
Disregarded.
that one dismissed. And ultimately it was a form of disrespect. Had we been, if we were really street,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
right, that could have looked very different because some persons, and again, because persons recognize and know that we operate through a space of regality, of royalty, of diplomacy in a very African ancestral context, and because we did not want to bring any disrespect in the form that we were disrespected, we elected to just sit, gather our thoughts, and speak from a space of not anger, not even emotion. I mean, we were sitting there with calabash, pouring libations from one to the other to make sure that we kept ourselves fluid. I think we talked so soft to make sure we didn't just scream out and say, "My son, you wrong." We didn't do that. All right.
Carry on bad. Could have
Right.
done it.
And what was interesting was while this was going on, because as has been alluded to earlier, the whole idea was, well, we have to stop because the buses are coming and we have another event and so forth and so on. So when the bus got stuck in traffic and people
Mm-hmm.
still had to wait over an hour, there was ample time for us who were asked, do you have, we have a Q&A segment. Are there any questions from the audience? And not just us, but several other sisters and brothers came to the mic. But when they saw us, then it became an issue. And I'm not, whatever the optics were, I can't speak for what they saw. I know that we came in a space of not anger, animosity, or threat or antagonism of any sort. We were consciously, I remember many of us had our little notes like in our hand to make sure we stayed. So it was a question, not a statement delivery on the panel that you weren't on. Question. And we were denied that. And this is not the first time. And obviously, it wasn't the last time. And that's why when persons hear the reference of these same men, and you can go and look and see who they are. I
Mhm.
think for the purpose of because it's not like it won't be easy to right?
It
Because
ain't difficult.
right. So we're just highlighting that African Queen Mother warriors have decreed. We're not doing a declaration. We're not getting into no tit for tat back and forth. We're just making it clear. Think of it like a papal bull. Once the Pope gives a decree from the Vatican, that's how it go for like centuries until it's revoked. So what we're saying, what we're enabling our brothers and sisters of light and those that choose to support truth, justice, order, reciprocity, balance, divine righteousness, and harmony as Ma'at. Those that speak Ubuntu and then tear apart the very foundation and core of those of us that are coming in the interest of Ubuntu. We say, I am because you are. But if you're trying to dismantle me, to discredit me, to mash up my ability to make a living, to mash up my ability to be able to give voice in a space that you just came to the other day. And I gonna say that. Some persons just came to this like the other day. And they are the ones that have been enabled and permitted to offer forms of disrespect and disregard and dismissiveness to many of our sisters in particular, and some of our brothers as well. And usually they attack the brothers that support the sisters. I just needed to offer that small interjection so that when we are moving forward in our reasoning today, that we are clear that this is a decree. We're just giving most of us, all of us are researchers. We come from different backgrounds, so we can do the academic research and speak of the analysis of the crisis and so forth and the philosophical, ideological realms. We can do that. But we're speaking from a space of heart. And we're doing our best to not scream it out so that it's taken in my eye. But it's not a warning. It's definitely not a threat. This is how we're going to go from before no, because our ancestors have decreed that.
We must look at the character of those who are the same men. We must look at that. We must look at the model which is being applied to the affairs of the African family that is being exploited, traumatized, and continues to be traumatized by agents of a Eurocentric system. If you have melanin skin, whatever degree to which you consider yourself to be honorable, you would look at these things. These things are to do with a people who have been stolen, exploited, and women are considered during times of war to be collateral damage. We are sites of comfort. People do with us what they want. And when we articulate that something is not right, we are then discredited. We are then considered to be hysterical or an angry Black woman, unless we find we are favored by these same men. And some of that, and I'm not in a position to know exactly who, because there may be some people who are doing their best within the context of that space, but there is a thing that happens with abuse, with misogynistic approaches, with people who enjoy misogynoir, where they will cut off your money. I'm not wondering about this. I'm speaking as someone who knows this to be true. They will cut off your source of air unless you become horizontal.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even get the benefit of being horizontal in a 5-star place. You are encouraged to be what is it when you're not quite lying down, but you're still being fucked over?
Oh Lord.
That one. And see, that's why I'm so grateful that you put that. Because see, again, I love that we're able to have this versation and then look at this international press statement. I would like to come so that persons know this is, and anyone that desires, again, African Queen Mother Warriors at gmail.com, or place it inside of the Facebook chat, the YouTube chat. There's ways to reach us. We are very transparent when
Do
it
a
comes
search. Do a search.
and just
One,
I
one
think
of Sister Esther's
okay.
camera. She
The
said to carry on.
Yes, it's
Okay,
There we
doing its own thing.
go. Okay. This
I
is
mean,
it.
one of the things I wanted to touch on and to make a point is that we as Africans, we need to learn from our history and from the past. We seek solutions. We're looking at reparations, reparatory justice. We're looking at restoring ourselves. If we look at the tenets of reparations, we're looking at reclaiming that which was lost and putting it back in place. And one of the things we need to do is we need to learn from our history. And our history has always shown us that when we do not adhere to those principles, those fundamental principles, you spoke of Mahat, Ubuntu, and all the myriad of other principles that underpin our ontology and our philosophy as Africans, when we do not look at our history and learn the lessons from our history, which is that we must place our spirituality as part of our identity, we always falter. And this is one of the things that is happening currently with these same men and the women who buy into the misogyny, the misogynar, the patriarchy, those who have sold their souls and betrayed themselves to sit at the table and eat the crumbs, because the crumbs appear to them to be huge feasts, but in reality we know, because it lacks spirituality, that's what it is. Our lessons have shown us, if we look at that 80 and the revolution, it was when the spiritual people, Bookman, Dati, and various people came in and brought that spirituality that we were able to overcome. And it makes me think of Ifa. There's a saying in Ifa that says that the women had the power and the men tricked the women and took it. Now, we are at a time, as you said, you articulated, Senator Doctor, when things are not going to keep going like that. We are coming back. We know, I had a wonderful guest, big shout out to our queen, Cezanne Poetess, for her phenomenal energy on my show and for her poetry and her creativity. And she is someone that downloads and connects with spirit. And she spoke of seeing the creator. And the creator is a melanated, let's get this right, a melanated African woman. Now we know this, mitochondrial Eve. The melanated African woman is pure energy. She's the creator of everything. And as African women, we are supposed to be the rulers, the leaders. The world was created by us for us to rule and lead. And circumstances have led to, as you say, the vertical. Is it the vertical? Yes. I get confused. The things that were supposed to be this way.
Yeah, the things that were supposed to be
this way,
vertical,
and then tipping upside down. So now the white man, for example, followed by his lackeys who adhere to his principles, whether they're the same men from our community, the women who buy into the misogynoir and the misogyny and the patriarchy from our community, who sold themselves, they are also now sitting with the white man at his table at the top. And we, the African women, have now been played. But we see this time, the energy is turning. Nothing lasts forever. Everything will return as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. And so we African Queen Mother warriors are saying to you that we know what is to be. We have the capacity, we have the solutions. I mean, the women on this call are phenomenal on every level. And intellectually, like you say, we could sit down and write everything they write better. Even with my dyslexic self, I could still write. In fact, I never forget in 2015 when they put out this statement and we were like, what? I went up to the table with the same men and I said, listen, this is not appropriate, this is missing, this is missing. And they looked at me and they said, and I said, you know what, give it to me, I will rewrite it for you. And I got this response. And I won't say which men, but you can imagine they looked at me like I'd offered to shoot them in the head. Like I'd stood up there and said, "Boy," but all I said was, "Look, I will rewrite this for you." I offered my services for free. Nobody paid my passage and my hotel bill. I was staying by my uncle, sleeping on the sofa. I so we have the solutions and we have the capacity. And what we're reaching out to you to say, this has to change. The voices that are here, alongside other voices of African Queen Mother warriors and African King Father warriors, the men who stand with us and understand and overstand our role in creation. We have the solutions. We're working with them. Some of them are involved with the work we do.
I want to read this section because what we've done is we have offered a 2025 version of
Mm-hmm.
what we were saying in 2015. So the continuum is great. And I quote, Eurocentric paradigms which ignore established African centered traditions and life practices are not conducive to our demand for reparatory justice. As the African Union hosts the annual International Summit on the theme of 2015, Year of Women's Empowerment and Development towards Africa's Agenda 2063, and the world commemorates, memorializes, and celebrates African Liberation Day, African women must be respected. In unity with our brothers and sisters of humanity, African queen mothers and revolutionary women warriors have united in order to have our voices heard by publishing this international statement. The issues raised herein are being shared in the spirit of love, peace, harmony, reciprocity, truth, justice, order, and balance. And I share that segment because what we've just said has reiterated what we had to say sitting after being dismissed from an event that was happening on the year. Notice what the theme was in 2015, Year of Women's Empowerment and Development.
Oh, the irony.
And so and again, we're seeing that some things, and I like to bring it to where we are now, as we're having this convening, there have been a host of initiatives, recognizing the anniversary of the Pan-African Conference in London over 100, I believe, 25 years ago, right? And our beloved African Queen Mother warrior, Sister Esther, was able to be, again, I'm so grateful that we had the representation and someone engaged in that piece. We've seen that there's been a declaration that has come from that. We're praying that that is something that had not been subjected to the same experience that we had, that declarations come forward without the full respectful vetting from those present as well as those that were not present, usually for economic or the scheduling reasons. I think it's really important to know that while we're having this convening and this reasoning, that many of our thousands of our sisters and brothers are converging into the United Nations headquarters in New York. Maybe not the best time in light of what's happening in the 48 contiguous United Snakes of America. And I say it like that intentionally because right now it's very serpentine, not serpentine Kundalini positive, but serpentine very reptilian, very challenging. And we're praying for the safety of everyone that's going in and out of New York, in and out of US immigration, in and out this ICE experience with this administration that is quite hostile to anything ancestral, ancient, African, Black, non Eurasian, non European. Let me be very clear, right?
And
Very
very
destructive.
destructive and dismantling at the moment.
Of course. I mean, anarchy and fascism at the same time, it just looks, at least we know what it looks like in 21st century version. I think that that's the part that is very important for persons to know. So while the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent is having its fourth session hosted in this space that may not be the safest space, but we're praying for there to be some positivity that comes from that. We're also looking at some of the same energy that we experienced that are going to be the same energy. So, granted, there's a certain continuity in that regard. However, our decree, our voices are commanding that there be another shift because any type of gathering that's happening now has to be inclusive of the African woman. And not just any African woman, but those voices with actionable deliverables of African women that will make the full contribution appropriate. That's what I'm trying to get to. It should not be that we shouldn't have to beg to do the work, beg to get the money for the work, beg to be at the table to do the work, beg to have a crumb come this way for the work. And then it shouldn't be that. It should be a very inclusive, engaging experience that supports life, that supports ancestral resonance. Because other than that, as we've had this conversation before, then we're committing ancestral treason and we're creating a very unpleasant outcome for what we're saying is supposed to be done. I mean, even again, looking at this statement, I keep coming to this because I like for persons to know the continuity. And those persons that don't know what we're talking about, again, if those that have just joined us, you're listening to African Queen Mother Warriors Rising. We are having a reasoning on global African Caribbean affairs. We're looking at reparations. We're looking at recognition, justice, and development. And we're speaking specifically to things that have transpired while everyone's honoring anniversaries. This is an anniversary of a very engaging experience that many of us have survived and still thrive through. But the decree, African women must lead. And that, with that being said, I quote, through African consensus, this statement calls for revolutionary corrective actions for the end of willful disrespect, marginalization, exclusionism, intellectual warfare, internalized sexist terrorism, misogyny, pathological patriarchy, and genocidal violence against our African women anywhere and everywhere, particularly within the organizational and institutional frameworks of these organizations, including summits, congresses, conventions, and similar gatherings. I just needed to make sure that, and again, there's only like a small portion left, but just so persons are clear that this was not a new versation. We took our time to make sure that the manner in which this decree, this statement was shared was so that there would be some, and there was very little response. The response was, be careful. The
Yeah.
response was
Oh,
exclusionism. The response was to dismiss, the same way we dismiss from a microphone, there was this dismissive, well, you're not going to get invited to the next one. We don't need you to come, no. Right? So again, in any gathering, it's imperative that we not only call upon the names of our benevolent ancestors, but that we ceremoniously invite their presence in the most appropriate and respectable manner. That the failure to safeguard and to provide optimal protection and security is a serious issue. The publishing of delegates' names in public foyers is a risk on several levels. Unhealthy foods have no place in these gatherings, in keeping with our African cosmology and sacred number traditions, that value, the extensive spiritual significance of numbers. We question the adoption of a quote 10-point plan that is not only modeling a Eurocentric value system, but devoid of a spiritual component and feminine aspect. Again, remember this statement is April 2015 and was disseminated on African Liberation Day, May 25th. 2015. So I just like for person, don't think this is, make sure you keep it in context, right? And we African Queen Mothers and Revolutionary Women Warriors decree to our nation and all of humanity that the wanton acts of disrespect, disregard, and threatening theatrics imposed upon African women by men and patriarchy controlled women will no longer be tolerated. Dot, 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 period. End quote. Just so the persons have context. So if you're not clear on what was said, or there's some missing comprehension element, please just send us an email. African Queen Mother Warriors at gmail.com. African is Afrakan. Afrakan, right? Queen Mother Warriors at gmail.com, or look for us in any of the social media so that you can have, because the document has been available for a decade.
We can make it available on every social media platform. I mean, I am being invited not to be as enthusiastic about sharing the data and the evidence that we hold. I am being very disciplined. I, I'm inviting African Queen Mother Warrior Esther, who would have been in receipt of that proclamation, that invitation, that statement, that which is not a warning. That was interesting. You said it is not a warning. Yeah, isn't it? Okay. So having heard the history and having become familiar with the process, which is what you're interested in, um, and you know, this on the heels of my call for everyone and anyone to do your research. This is not angry black women. You know, we are that trope that we are given whenever we say something's not right here. Can we have a look at this? The attack then happens onto the woman instead of saying, well, let's have a look at what it is you're talking about and see whether or not we are out of balance. You know, what is this thing called ma'at? What are these principles that you speak of? Is there any place that we can learn? Might these women be bringing something that is important, especially given that we can't have an African family without the African woman? We're just not interested in the act of pleasure seeking and empire building. We are interested in the welfare of the African family and honoring our ancestors. What say you, African Queen Mother Warrior Esther? Because I cannot promise that this, you know, you see, when African Queen Mother Warrior asked Sister Isis did that kind of thing like that, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have my children. I don't have my grandchildren.
Real, recognize real.
You're threatening people and you're careless in your threats because it's documented. The women who have been horizontal and have been betrayed are speaking. There are cases in the courts are going through the media where ones in high position who are practicing misogyny and misogynoir have found themselves in social media. Don't let that happen to you. Yes, Queen. I'm sorry. That was just the outline.
Yeah, I mean, you know, actually, just reflecting back on this 10-year journey, some other things came up for me. So obviously, I mean, I'm thinking back to what was the general atmosphere, especially for those of us who were part of the movement in Europe. And one of the things that was also happening around the same time, it was about who was invited at that summit, you know, who was on the program. And looking back over the program, we can see There was the sort of the recent formulation of NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission, linking with those in the Caribbean Reparations Commission. And there was kind of on the fringes of that, some people who were organizing to establish something called the European Reparations Commission. However, the people that were organizing or trying to establish the European Reparations Commission were totally outside of, the Pan-African movement and, long-standing reparations constituencies. And so there was that tension that was also going on around who was invited and which voices were being amplified to promote a kind of sort of united front around a particular idea that for me was about silencing sections of the movement for African reparations that people felt was problematic, that was, kind of classified as being almost renegade, um, and that people who were not just willing to defer to the hegemon, because we have now, you've spoken about African Queen Mother Warrior Sister Doctor about the empire building. But this is the hegemon. There are hegemons that are forming within these reparation structures, these emerging structures. Many of them are very hegemonic and cliquish because they only promote certain people who get with that program. And if you are outside of that, then woe betide you. And in particular, I think it was great to mention, it was Senate African Queen Mother Warrior Senate Doctor, the women of the hegemon as well. We focus a lot on the men, but we also have to think about those women or women folk, so-called sisters, who are supporting this. Why? Because they can be privileged and well positioned to benefit from the hegemonic systems that are developing. And so part of their function is to also suppress other women who do not fit in and do not submit to that hegemon. So that's what was happening. And I say it because I'm a member of PARCO, the Pan-African Reparations Coalition in Europe. And there was voices from the movement in Europe and in particular the UK, but those voices were much more, cooperative with the hegemon. And I have to say, even though I was a co-founder of the Global African Congress, that was one of the organizations. So people like me, who from the time I joined this movement have always been very visible, have always done spokesperson work because I am an advocate, it's part of what I do, then were being challenged for critiquing CARICOM and the approach that we were seeing, because we were also hearing the voices of those of you located outside of Europe, particularly in the Caribbean and in parts of Africa, Mama Africa, and the wider Americas or Abya Yala. We were hearing your voices. As PARCO, we see it as our responsibility to amplify the voices of the various, African heritage communities of reparatory justice interests. So we were doing that. And we were very much in touch with women in particular Caribbean countries who were having to deal with men in leadership of this movement who were being challenged because of issues of sexual and gendered violence against women. Yeah. And this was being, suppressed by many men who are elders and distinguished men in our communities who saw that as undermining this kind of false unity that they felt was popping up now. And that the voices of particularly women who were questioning that and who were challenging that in Ma'at, in recognition that how can we truly have reparatory justice if we are suppressing the voices of half of humanity, and in particular, our mothers, our sisters, our women folk who have been carrying this movement, and who have been leading, but who were not being recognized. So that was also happening at the same time. So there was a really wonderful convergence, even though these kind of two poles of really, trying to ensure that what we were doing was honoring the ethics of African reparatory justice, the principles and values based on our highest, ideals of Ma'at and Ubuntu, that we were trying to enforce that in love and with respect. So there were these two poles of activity that were happening divinely, simultaneously, but not connected. And so this anniversary has given me an opportunity, being a student of our people's story, to really look back on who were the forces, what were the arguments, what were the challenges that we were making, that now, as we say, our story is best qualified to reward our research, because now these voices are becoming louder and louder and louder. And the fact that we have, African Queen Mother warriors rising as an evolution of what you started back then is an indication of that. And so many other women who are joining us, so many of our brothers who support us. Because it's also true that those brothers who have always been alignment and recognized our role, and we've worked harmoniously and cooperatively together, have also been sidelined and maligned and attacked and accused of all kinds of things, because they have, healed whatever remnants of malevolent patriarchy that they have internalized as a result of that global system of domination of white supremacy racism. So I think it's important for us, and this is what we have committed to doing, for putting our narrative officially on the record, which we have continued to do. And this is so key, because there's so much, there's a proliferation of research and scholarship and documentaries and all kinds of, creative outputs that are telling partial narratives, partial stories about the journey of reparations. And we have to ensure that we must tell our own story, because we know that the tales of our liberation are being colonized, and they are being distorted in a way to create and shore up hegemonic men and the sisters that stand by them, because they are more interested in power for themselves rather than the true emancipation and liberation and restoration of the African family, where we can elevate the best of our African civilization that has sustained us, and that we need to elevate in order to take back our world and restore ourselves to being in the rightful place as custodians of this rich legacy that has been bequeathed to us.
I also want